Hello, my name is Hadassah Lewis, and this is my American Culture's reaction video to the Nacirema projects. This is actually not my first time reading these set of articles. I read them for the first time about a year ago when I was doing research into my intersectionality between race, class, gender, religion, and sexuality. I found it highly interesting, but at the time I actually thought it was a real scientific account that had been published in the 1940s. While it didn't surprise me, it was disappointing to know that this existed, because my first red flag with it was when they began to call the Nacirema people exotic. Now, we don't call people exotic today, and to be honest, we frankly probably never should have. Living, breathing human beings are not to be conversation pieces, to be entertainment or stared at. However, upon further examination, I really enjoyed the way that they presented American culture through a different lens. I found it highly interesting, especially my personal favorite part was when they talked about dentists, the mystical medicine mouth man. They said that he was ranked slightly lower in a hierarchy than a medicine man. This is shockingly true, because as I grew up with two doctor parents, they were always condescending toward dentists who they looked down upon. Fascinating that they drew these conclusions in these articles. They also mentioned the fact that dentists tended to be more sadistic, whereas the rest of the population, due to the way that they existed through their rituals that they had described in the article, tended to be more masochistic and self-hating. I find that personally fascinating in the culture that I grew up in, and as I go on to talk about the cultural ritual and ceremonies that I went through. I grew up in a cult off-brand group of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I myself have no religious affiliation or ties in belief, but in practice I am still very active in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. In fact, my husband and I were just asked recently to be the new directors of the Pathfinder Club at the local Seventh-day Adventist Church less than a mile from our house. Now, the Pathfinder Club is very similar to a boys or girls club or a Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. I very much hesitate to draw the comparison between Pathfinders and Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts because of the terrible abuse accusations, but as the Pathfinder director, I have never experienced abuse or any situation when I was a Pathfinder, and I work incredibly hard to make sure I vet every single staff member and make sure they go through multiple verified child safety courses before they're allowed to be with children. That distinction being made, the Pathfinder Club, for me, was the one place as a child I was able to escape the chaos and rules and pain of my family's house. It was the one day a week I was allowed to actually be a kid. I got to do honors, I learned the Pathfinder Pledge and law, I learned songs, I got to play with other kids, I learned practical skills like sewing, cooking, canning, cleaning, gardening, horse riding, etc. And I absolutely loved it. Now, my experience may not be universal, but I want the opportunity to pass that along, pass that ritual, if you will, of being able to experience being a kid through Pathfinders along to the next generation. Pathfinders itself started in the Seventh-day Adventist Church in 1907 as the Missionary Volunteers Society. One of their first initiatives was a group of 12 to 19-year-olds with the help of their adult congregation members doing a push for what is now known as the Dime Tabernacle. Now, in 1907 to 1910, everyone brought a dime whenever they could, usually every church service, but whenever they could, to help to build a new church. Now, even in 1907, adjusted for inflation today, a dime then would only be worth about $1.70 today. So still not very much money, but in the end, it paid off. By this point, the Missionary Volunteers Society had begun to invent a song, a law, a pledge, a uniform, and were ready to become more structured and break things into classwork to find more engaging activities and honors for the kids to do. By 1950, and later years, these groups were swarming with so-called teenagers that had nothing to do. Pathfinders in the church definitely stepped up. All of a sudden, there were kids ranging from 10 to 18 everywhere, in every single church. And they were doing so many new exciting adventures that the funding was just pouring in from everywhere. Eventually, the church leaders decided that they wanted to hold some camporees. They've actually done some. The first one was held in 1985 with 17,000 attendees. The most recent one was in 2019 in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, which had a record-breaking 74,900 people on Sabbath, or Saturday as they call it. The Pathfinder Club has grown extensively over the last 110 years. Over the course of the last 110 years, the Pathfinder Clubs have grown to over 1.6 million Pathfinders in over 160 different countries. It is my goal to share this with the next generation, to extend the rituals and the ceremonies to the next generation of kids. As far as whether or not the Pathfinder Society is beneficial to cultures in both the United States and around the world, I say absolutely yes. It made a huge difference in my life. I know it made a huge difference in my husband's life, and it's made a difference in many other people's lives too. From a scientific standpoint, there have been many articles documenting the wonderful benefits of living a simple, practical life, drinking water, gardening, living in balance with temperance in your body, exercising, eating right, getting enough sleep. All of these are advocated. In fact, in March of 2017, in Volume 5 of the American Preventative Medicine Journal, there's a wonderful article on the benefits, both physically, mentally, and emotionally, on gardening. And I find it incredibly fascinating that the Pathfinder group and society were doing this decades before many of those in the medical community caught up with it. I strongly believe that the Pathfinder Club is going to be shaping a huge number of young people over the next few years. And it is my job, it's my responsibility, in my opinion, to make sure that I can help these people be prepared for a crazily changing world. Because if I can help just one person live a happier, better life, I see it as a success. Thank you.